Welcome, everyone, to another session of TriTech University. My name is Bill Steppen, and today we are going to take a look at the inventory export utility found in the AIM software. We're going to approach it basically from a how to get the most out of it angle, because I'm sure a fair number of you have either used it before in the past, or maybe this is the first time you're hearing about it. But I just want to make sure that it all makes sense as far as what it can as well as cannot do. As always, we are making use of GoToWebinar. So if you have any questions along the way, definitely hop into that GoToWebinar toolbar, find the questions box, and go ahead and type in your question to me. I will monitor that throughout the course of the session and do my best to answer those as they come in. And if that webinar bar is taking up too much space on your screen, I know a lot of you have a little bit smaller screens, feel free to click the little button that you'll find on there. It looks like a little orange button with a white arrow, and that'll shrink that down and get it out of the way so that it's not taking up so much screen real estate. So without further ado, let's go ahead and take a look at the inventory export import program. It's actually a utility that you're going to find in modules and inventory and the utilities menu. It's going to be called inventory export import. And the way that this works is basically you're going to select a swath of your inventory for exporting out to Excel. Once it's in Excel, you can harness the power of Excel and its capability to do mass edits or adjustments, things like that. And you can then import those changes back in. That's kind of the idea. You export out, make your changes, and you import them back in. When you come to this screen, you'll notice that basically it gives you the option of filtering down on certain types of inventory, starting at the very top where you can choose any of these options: accessory inventory, serial inventory, serial numbers specifically. Serial inventory would refer to the SKUs under which you would receive the serials. And then you can also do the import of the accessory and serial number. So basically the starting to export and then finalizing with the import. So let's kind of take a look at how this works. From there below, you would then be able to tell it a breakdown of certain beats of inventory, such as whether or not it's at a certain location, whether or not you want to grab a certain manufacturer. The sales history in days really is just going to give you a number that gets exported. So the idea with that is it's really just going to be a number there for your reference. It's not going to export, for example, 180 days worth of sales history. It's really just to say, okay, you've sold this item X number of times in the past Y number of days. And then if you would like to filter it by a particular primary vendor, you can also select in the primary vendor number there. Now you'll notice it is looking for the number of the vendor. You can either type it in directly, or with the F6 key on your keyboard, you can make a selection there of your vendor by name. So you could go in, for example, and you could type in a specific name of a vendor. By the way, have been, and probably will be continuing to use this music database that we've been using over the course of these quarantinars. So if you're not in the music industry and none of these names are looking familiar, don't worry too much about that. The concept remains the same, whether you're in the music or firearms or golf, hobby, or vacuum and sewing, whatever industry you might be in, the concept remains the same. So that's another way of filtering down by a specific vendor. To the right of that, if you are making use of selection codes, which are basically customizable little categories that you can apply to inventory, you can make selections by that. And then wrapping up the top half, you can make a selection by season if you so desire. Carrie is asking, can you import an Excel spreadsheet to enter inventory in the very beginning, or does the information already need to be there? That is an excellent question, Carrie, and that is actually a very valid point. This can only export and work with inventory that already exists in the AIM inventory program. This would not be a way of actually importing raw inventory into the system to create it. So it already does have to exist. That being said, with our B2B service, there is a way to import third-party B2B vendors and their inventory into the system. So that may be something that we'll take a closer look at in a webinar down the road. I think I might have touched on it briefly in the webinar I did a few months ago on B2B in general, but I can definitely do another one too if there's enough demand for it. But thank you so much for the question there, Carrie. Michael is also asking, can you expand a little bit more on selection codes? Definitely. Selection codes are basically another way of being able to organize and sort and search through inventory. The idea of selection codes is they're going to be found, let me go ahead and minimize this for the moment. They're going to be found in your maintenance setup. So if you go into maintenance and inventory, you'll have your option here for setting up selection codes. Now, selection codes are basically up to you what you would like to use them for. They get associated with SKUs, and the idea with these is that you can associate a selection code with any inventory item regardless of what category or subcategory or who the manufacturer is or anything like that. So it's a way of grouping inventory together outside of those boundaries of category, of manufacturer, of vendor. In essence, they're kind of a precursor, if you will, to the attribute program that we came up with here in version 12. An example I kind of like to give is there was a music store that I helped implement about 10 years ago or so at this point, and they had a special room for what they called exploratory music. So it was a place where all the kids in the neighborhood could come in. They could bang on the instruments and strum them along and just play around with them. They were all available for sale, but they wanted to be able to sort both by the kind of instrument that they were, as well as the fact that they were in this room. So I suggested that they create a selection code called exploratory and associate that with the inventory that would be in that room. So then when it comes down to it, back in your inventory SKUs, modules inventory, add change inventory, and we'll just hop into a change inventory and pull up my good old RT14 buddy here. What you're going to see on the inventory record is the ability to associate a selection code with that product line. So that way you could go in and then you can, like we were alluding to there, you could then filter and search by that selection code in other areas of the program, such as the inventory export that we're talking about now. So hopefully that helps out there, Michael, and hopefully that helps anyone else out that may have been wondering what the heck selection codes are. And I also kind of alluded to there, and if you are coming new into version 12, or if this is a whole new experience for you, we do have a function kind of outside of that. It's not something that you'll find in the export program, but there is an attribute area that you can go in and establish on as well. The idea of attributes is basically they are extra fields that you can add to any records in your inventory where they can have their own associated values. So some of the examples that I have here for the music industry, composers, arrangers, artists, etc. In other industries, for example, we would be talking about gun caliber, fit and finish, shoe sizes, shaft lengths for golf, and degrees of attack on wedges, different types of motors and batteries for hobby enthusiasts, so all different kinds of things with that. That being said, we really don't have a way of implementing that for the inventory export import, so I'm not going to spend any more time on that, but I did do a webinar on attributes on our member portal page where we have that linked, where we have all the V12 webinars. It'll be pretty much at the very bottom. It was actually one of the first webinars I ever did on version 12 because it was so new and exciting. So let's go ahead and hop back into the soup du jour, inventory exports and imports. So basically what you can do is you can drill down to the inventory that you want to export, ultimately finalizing on whether or not you'd like to grab it from a certain category and subcategory. I'm going to go ahead and do band and orchestra accessories just because I know that will be a nice small area of inventory to work with here. Let's say I wanted to check on some details on those inventory items, make any changes that I would like to make, and import those back in. You'll notice though, before I can click this export button, it's going to say I have to check mark that I have read and understood the documentation for this program, and I do have a working backup. If you're wondering what the documentation is, it's available on our member portal in the download section of the member portal, specifically in the documentation area, and it's going to be called Inventory Export Import. That document goes through and basically elaborates on what we have available to change. And let me see if I can't get this to show up. For some reason, it is getting blocked here. Come on. Come on. I know you should be able to show this. Oh, I'm doing the wrong thing. There we go. This will probably make a difference. Come on. Oh, it's always great when I'm fighting the GoToWebinar program. Come on. All right, I'm going to stop sharing the screen for a moment and restart it. Come on. All right, now let's see if I can get this to show what I want to go. Yes, no? There we go. All right. We are back, and I'm going to make this bigger so that hopefully everyone can see it. And I think I'm going to zoom in even more just so that I can make this a little bit easier to read on the smaller screens. So the documentation that it is referring to and that I now have up on screen for you to finally see is going to talk about all the things that you can do with this program. So as you can see, it's designed to export inventory out to Excel, and then you can go ahead and make changes and import those back in. Now, the most important element of this document is it's going to go through and let you know which of the fields are editable and which of them are not. So you'll notice that it's going to let us know that what these columns basically are. So for example, column A is the version, column B is the primary key number. Most of these things that are not editable, you really don't have to worry about. The things that are editable, such as the category, the subcategory, the manufacturer, hopefully those are a bit more straightforward and easier to kind of understand. You'll notice that basically it has a listing here of what the column is and whether or not it's editable. And for the most part, most of these fields are. A few key ones that are not editable, such as the quantity. You'll notice that this is not going to let you adjust the quantity. You'll want to do a physical inventory for that. I have done a number of webinars on physical inventory procedures. Other things that are not editable, you'll notice the vendor name is not editable. You really wouldn't want to worry about editing the vendor name, because what you'll notice right above that is it's going to look for the vendor number, and that is editable. So if you needed to change, for example, who the vendor is given product, don't worry about the name, just change the number. And that way it'll go back and change the name when you import it back in, and it sees who the new vendor is based on the number. The vendor number 1 is basically going to be the primary vendor, and then vendor 2 and 3 and 4 are basically extra spots in there for secondary vendors that you can buy from. Some other spots that are not able to be edited. The cost is not going to be editable, so you'll basically want to make sure that you're not trying to change the cost if you are doing this. And then when it comes to titles in for inventory, this is kind of a holdover from version 11. We've kind of consolidated all of that into one table now of accessories and titles. It's just now all accessories. For the most part, it's basically the same concept. And you'll notice it's basically, again, all very much the same kind of concept. The main differences there are we do have some of those attribute fields for titles, and those are just now attributes in inventory as a whole. So hopefully that's going to make sense. Richard is asking if when I'm done, I can also talk about the customer export import, and I definitely can. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and minimize that in case we need to bring it back up later on. But I'm going to go ahead and check mark that I have read and understand those. It also is going to mention that I do have a working backup. Now, obviously, we recommend having a backup anytime you're doing these kinds of mass changes to the inventory. That being said, if all you were doing is exporting out a very small fraction of your inventory and then importing that back in for a very minor change, such as a description or something like that, probably you wouldn't be doing that in the export import routine. You could do that just as easily and probably faster and just change inventory. But nevertheless, don't take that as to say that you don't need to have a backup. I recommend having a nightly backup at all times. And if you are going to do some kind of mass change that the export import routine would be hugely beneficial for, then yes, make sure you have a backup just prior to doing this export and import routine. So let's go ahead and export. You'll notice that when I hit export, what it's going to do is it's going to go ahead and ask me where I would like to save that. It's going to bring up my output option, and it's going to already have export full data check mark for me. I can then go ahead and click the little please button and then basically point where I would that to be saved. I'm going to go ahead and just put it to my desktop, and we're going to call this export import webinar. We'll go ahead and hit save on that. And then that brings up the path, and I'll go ahead and hit OK. And then we'll go ahead and minimize. And of course, now I've got my background hidden here because I switched it to being a clean screen. So let's go ahead and switch this to the normal screen. While that's switching over, there's another question coming in. It's Jennifer from the Music Man. I need to take this later. Today's our last day of the fiscal year. Oh, okay. So she's just saying goodbye. So no worries, Jennifer. Hello from the recording land. I'm sure you'll pick this back up when you're checking out the recording. Katie is asking, if you add a manufacturer that isn't already set up, does it add that manufacturer? That is an excellent question, Katie. I don't know if it would do that or not. That's something that we could certainly explore here. And then Richard is asking, we will be adding a large number of customers and adding data to existing. So yeah, technically the export import would only let you work with existing customers, kind of much in the same way that this inventory export only lets you work with existing inventory. So hopefully that answers that there, Richard. But let's go ahead and take a look and see what we have to work with. So recall that we exported the records from our band and orchestra accessories category. So we're seeing the version, the PK, the model. Again, don't worry too much about what version is or what primary key is or things like that. The important things here are the things that are hopefully a little bit more memorable, such as manufacturers, descriptions, quantities, things like that. Recall again that some of these are not going to be editable, like the quantity or the vendor names. But let's go ahead and check on something here, just to answer Katie's question directly. If the manufacturer is going to be something that could be changed. So we can see here it does come up and say that this is editable. So let's go ahead and have a little bit of an experiment here. Let's find our good old RT14. There it is right at the top. Let's go ahead and change the manufacturer from Roche Thomas to Professor TriTech. Go ahead and put that in as the manufacturer, and we'll go and test that out once we import that back in. Now that said, basically, as we recall, basically what we have here are a number of fields. John is asking, will the export show any custom attributes? Let's actually go ahead and take a look down at the end here. If there are any custom attributes, they will more than likely be down here at the end. So we have physical inventories, minimum minimums, manufacturer numbers, the active E details, SKU links, single links, descriptions. Here we go. So here are the attributes. So yes, John, those attributes will basically show at the very end of the list. So all of the attributes here are those custom attributes, and basically you can come in and you can fill in the details here and ultimately import those back in. In fact, let's go ahead and do an example of that. Let's find let's say the size, and we will say it is big. Not that 2 ounces I think these are 2 ounce. I don't think 2 ounces really qualifies as big. Let's see, what is that actually size? I guess it is valve oil. So I guess the 2 ounce Mighty Mist would have been the one I was kind of thinking of there. Not that it really makes a difference. We will go ahead and we will test that as well. I'm fairly certain that those are editable, John. But yeah, basically once you've kind of made your changes, we'll go ahead and we will save these changes. I'll click the save button up here. It's also going to be very important that we close the document so that way it doesn't interfere with the import back in. Let's hop back into AIM, go back into the export import utility, bring that back up here. Guess we'll have to come back here through to modules. Where were we? Modules, inventory, and utilities, and inventory export import. See if I can get this back up here. It's kind of looking a little goofy there. Let's see if I can go ahead and close it and try this again. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and we are going to go ahead and import that accessory inventory back in. So we're going to do a type of import accessory inventory. And then we are going to go ahead and take a look at the import tab. Now you'll notice on the import tab, it's just going to ask us basically if we have made any changes to pricing, to selection codes, to min-max codes, to mins and or maxes or minimum minimums or anything like that. If we've done those for one location, and you might recall that we really only can export from one location at a time, do we want to take those changes and apply them to all of our locations? So just something to keep in mind there for those of you who are maintaining 2 or more store locations with this. If you are looking to make a change across all of your locations, you would technically be able to take advantage of this, assuming it's one of these options for the pricing or for the quantity levels that are adjustable here. You could definitely check mark this and apply it so that it applies to all locations without having to export every single location and do this multiple times and import them back in. So hopefully that makes sense. Let's go ahead. And John is following up. What about those attributes that are unique to your business? If I'm not mistaken, that is actually coming directly from the attribute list. So even if you have unique attributes, they should be getting exported on that list there, John. But thank you so much for the question. Let's go ahead and try this out, shall we? So let's go ahead and import, fingers crossed. Actually, I don't have a working backup. We're going to go ahead and find, yeah, I know, bad bill. We're going to go ahead and find that document. So let's go out to the desktop. Let's find my export of import webinar. We will go ahead and click on open. And it's just letting us, it's giving us that reminder of, hey, we are looking for these data fields here. So we're going to go ahead and click import. And there we go. The import was successful. Now let's go ahead and check to see if those changes that we made have been implemented. So let's go back a menu. We'll go into, let me go ahead and close this out, get it out of the way. We'll go to add change inventory. We'll go to change inventory and we will pull out old RT14. And first and foremost, let's check the manufacturer. So it looks like it needs to have that manufacturer name in the table there, Katie. So something to keep in mind for that. It did not, in fact, change the manufacturer name to Professor Tritech. So something to keep in mind for that. When it comes to the attributes, it did not pull in that attribute either. So that is something that I'm going to make a note here on there for you, John, and see if that is something that is editable. I don't imagine why it shouldn't be, but I will check on that. Attributes, editable in export import. So yes, those are things that I will check in on. And what I will do for everyone who's in attendance here is I will send out a mass email just letting everyone know what I find on that. So as far as the rest of that, now obviously those are two things I changed, and I was 0 for 2 as far as changing those things. I didn't really have any kind of plan of attack as far as what to change or what not to change. Mostly what I wanted to kind of point out was what is technically editable in that respect. So a couple of things I do want to point out here. You'll notice that some of these do have asterisks on them. And when it comes to that, you're going to see that that's basically on the category. And there was another one here on the requires serial. So one of the things I'm going to mention here is basically, yes, you can change the category. When you change the category, what it's going to do is it is going to go back not only for your inventory record and change it, let's say, from category 1 to category 2 or category 5 to category 12. It's also actually going to go ahead and make an attempt to change all of the sales history for that item as far as its category and subcategory. So just kind of keep that in mind. It is going to try and make that change. That's kind of what the exclamation or the asterisk is alluding to. You can see it's letting you know that it can be changed. It's not recommended. Honestly, we do recommend that you try and make sure your categories and subcategories are in the order that they need to be in. You'll notice basically the main thing here is it's not going to make journal entries. So in the case of the values of your inventory, because the categories are tied to ledger accounts, it's not going to take the cost value of that item and move it from one ledger category to another ledger category. So if you are planning on using this function to manipulate what categories these items are in, you can technically do that. You just might have to go back in then afterwards and make some journal entries to correct those cost values. Same thing technically also for the cost of goods sold values and maybe even the sales values if you are doing all these changes. So just thought I'd recommend that. You'll also notice the other one there was for the requires serial at point of sale. It can be changed. It's not recommended. The idea with that is the item has to be free in order for it to require a serial. That's a whole backstory as far as this whole concept of it requiring a serial, but it should not be done on any open layaways. So that's the other kind of little footnote to go along with all of that. So you technically can make those changes. We don't recommend them. Let me check to make sure I'm keeping up on my questions here. Actually, I guess I just answered Katie's questions. Hope I'm not jumping ahead, but does changing anything in the category, subcategory columns affect the general ledger? So, yep, it's not affected. You will need to make journal entries yourself. I guess I already answered your question there, Katie. Colin asks, Would any of the boxes be checked to change the info on the import? Technically, when it comes to that, those check boxes, really, those are just going to be for, let me bring that back up here. So I've got that back on screen. Those check boxes that you saw were really just whether or not you wanted to apply those changes. Those changes were applicable across the multiple locations. So we'll just bring that back up and have that on screen here again. Let me get the change inventory program out of the way, and we'll go into the utilities, clicking wrong thing. There we go. Bring that back up to the inventory export import. So you can see here when these checkboxes, it's really just regarding pricing, selection codes, max, and things like that for all locations. Anyway, that's all that's mentioning there, Colin. Thank you so much though for the question there. Katie says, changing the subcategory really doesn't mess with general ledger. Actually, you are correct. Changing the subcategory does not. The ledger is tied at the category level, not at the subcategory level. So let me just use the drop-down menus. I think that'll be more straightforward. You'll notice in the maintenance categories and subcategories, at the category level is where we find the ledger numbers tied into it. So if you were to move, let's say, an item that you have 10 in stock of, and it costs you $10, so you have $100 of stock in 5 percussion. If you were to try and suddenly change that from category 5 percussion to category, let's say 14 karaoke, it will make the change as far as the category number and name, but it's not going to move that $100 in value from percussion to karaoke. You would need to go in and do that yourself. Likewise, if you had made sales item in the past, in the sales history, it'll move those to reflect the new category, but it will not have moved those sales values from the 411.5 to the 414 or the 411.14. It will not have made those adjustments. You would need to make those adjustments yourself. So something to keep in mind there. Omar asks, if I'm regarding the general ledger, if I'm not using it, will it still affect it? It doesn't really matter at that point. If you're not using the ledger or the ledger reports or anything like that, not a big deal, really. And that actually is a great point. The ledger is basically reflective of the activity in the rest of the program. So if you're not making full use of the ledger reports, or if you don't even have the ledger module, you can still run all of your reports and get your margins and your sales and your reorders and all of that from the rest of the program. The ledger is really just there to satisfy the accountancy type questions and get those types of reports. So if you're not making use of that, the changing of the categories there that will go back and that will show those reports accurately. Wrapping up Katie's question of categories, because I realized I didn't elaborate on that. You'll notice when we go and take a look at the subcategories, there really isn't anything here relating to ledger. It's just all about extra details. So if you kept that item in category 5 and just moved it from, let's say, subcategory 1 to subcategory 3, there is no ledger that needs to be adjusted in that. It's all staying in that 411 and 120 and 412-5. So hopefully that helps with that there, Katie. If I have time, Katie asks, could I talk about how to edit a manufacturer name? We have one that's spelled wrong. I don't want to mess anything up by changing that. And Katie, if I remember correctly, you are still on version 11. For version 11, I don't have that in front of me at this time. You want to go in and actually add the manufacturer to the manufacturer table, the correct spelling. You would then want to go into the inventory utilities area and change the manufacturer from the old one to the new one, and that would, by extension, remove the old one. In version 12, you can just go into the manufacturer table and change the name of the manufacturer. So let's say if I noticed that I had misspelled Casio, I could go in and I could put it there with the appropriate, 0 instead of the O, and just hit the save on that, and that would go ahead and update that. I'm having some fun with that, but yeah, we did improve on that in version 12. So hopefully that makes sense there, Katie. If anything, it's another incentive to upgrade, and I know that you are working on that. Not a big deal for that. So I do want to go ahead and honor Richard's request to take a look at the customer export imports. So let me go ahead and kind of close out of here. While I'm doing that, if there are any other questions on the customer export, or excuse me, the inventory export import, definitely let me know. But since it kind of is in that same veins, we'll go and take a look in the customer export import found in the customer utilities area. It's kind of that same concept. We have a document called customer export import, kind of the sister document to the inventory export import. Let me actually go ahead and pull that up here, since we will have that in front of us. Let me go ahead and find that document. There we go. So we'll go ahead and pull that up here and have that on screen. All right, so that's the inventory. Here we go, customer export import. So basically, it's kind of that same concept. We're going to be seeing a listing of customer fields in an Excel spreadsheet. Some of these are editable, some of them are not. It's going to let us know what is editable. For example, we can see the customer default is editable with caveats. The account number is not. For the most part, if I remember correctly, everything else is. You'll notice most of these are coming up and saying yes, and most of them do have that little exclamation or asterisk next to them, letting you know that that can be changed. However, the program will not automatically change these customer fields to match the customer default setup. So you will need to go back and make those adjustments yourself if that is the case. So other things to keep in mind, dates are going to need to be in month, day, year format. Credit card types, that's probably not even really applicable anymore. I can see that this document is probably from several versions ago. Other things such as valid tax exempt types, that is an editable field, and if you are making a change with that, the numbers are going to be between 1804 and 1810. You're going to find that in system categories 1804 through 1810. I'll show you where that is. And other things such as the mail codes, it's going to be expecting the mail codes that you have set up in maintenance and customer maintenance and mail codes. And then decimal formats should be entered as the decimal, not the whole number. So just kind of things with that. So with all that being said, then let's hop back over into the program. And at this point, basically, it's just going to be based on these filtering criteria, what location they're coming from, whether they have a certain customer type, and whether or not you only want to export customers that have an email address. We'll go ahead and lie that we have the backup, and we'll export that. And we'll go ahead and point that to the desktop. And we'll call it customer. Let's do export, import, customer. There we go. And we'll hit OK. While we're looking at that, export successful. Omar asks, could I mass delete duplicate customers in the export import? No, you will not be able to, but Omar, you may be happy to know that if you have a lot of duplicate customers, there is a utility in the program called merge customers that will let you find those duplicate customers, and it will merge those together so that way you're not just deleting them, you're taking any history that might be on those extra duplicate accounts and combining them into one account. So I would recommend checking that out. But yeah, let's go ahead and see what my customer export looks like. So we'll go ahead and get back down to my desktop and pull in the customer export this time. And we can see here we've got our accounts here with the default number they're associated with, the account number, the billing account, the last name, the address, all of that wonderful fun stuff. And basically at this point, you might recall that we can go in and make some of these changes. Other changes are not available. So back to the top here, really the only a couple of fields that weren't editable are the version, the PK, and the account number. Some folks I know have asked this in the past. What is this whole idea behind billing account number? Billing account number would be if you, let's say, have one account that makes the purchases, but another account pays for them. So in the music industry, for example, you have the teachers who bill the school, or the schools that bill the district, or just kind of that relationship. In other industries, maybe let's say you have the police officers that bill the department, or the range officers that bill the range itself, or just kind of things of that nature. The golf course professionals that bill the course. So whatever that kind of relationship is, basically who's buying it, but then who's paying for it is the difference there. And you'll notice that is editable, because if you are going to be specifying a different account, that does need to be changed. So you can definitely edit that. Let's go ahead and just say that we were doing a mass change of zip codes. So we could go in and we could find any zip codes, and let's say I got those keyed in wrong and I wanted to make a change to that. I could come in here and I could find those zip codes. I am by no means an Excel person. I can't even say that I stayed at a Holiday Inn Express last night because I am quarantined at home just like the rest of you. But let's say that you wanted to change all of these 60750 to a different one, and I'm sure there's a way to do it en masse, but you could come in here and you could basically just punch in what the new value would be, and then ultimately import those back in. So that's kind of the whole idea with this. It's basically the same concept as the inventory export import. A lot of these fields you're going to find are easier to edit because, as Katie mentioned, there's no underlying table for a lot of these fields that it needs to match up with. That being said, the document did mention a couple of them, and in those cases, they are going to be found in the mailing area and in the, if I can get the questions box out of the way for just a moment, the tax exempt status and things like that. So finding those on here, and I probably went past them already, but the tax exempt, I think I've got a customer that's tax exempt in here. Let's just go ahead and find it. There we go. So tax exempt is right here. You'll notice these are all zeros. If for whatever reason one of them was going to be tax exempt, I would change the that to from an N to a Y. Let's go ahead and pick on someone here. Let's find the high school. So there they are. It's line number 4 here. And let's go ahead and make line 4 be a tax exempt. And when it comes to that tax exempt ID, you might recall it mentioned it's looking for a specific number. Let's go ahead and look at where you can find those numbers. We'll go into maintenance and ledger and system categories. You might recall this from another webinar I did not too long ago. And let's go ahead and just do a filter by tax. You can see we've got lines 1804 through 1810 here for tax exempt government, resale, out-of-state, school, church, etc. Schools are 1807, so I will hop back over to my file here, and I will make this be 1807. I'm going to go ahead and save this. Let's go ahead now and import that back in. So we will say we are importing. We're not going to worry about updating names and addresses to mixed case. I'm going to go ahead and say that I do have the backup. Let's go ahead and find that file and import it to the desktop and export, import customers. There's the file. We'll click import. They're all imported. And let's just go and check on my school. So change customers and Jones Junior High School. There they are. And fingers crossed, since I struck out on manufacturer changes, we should be able to go to the billing tab and see they are now tax exempt, and they are a school. So just some things to keep in mind with that. For the most part, everything else is data entry to begin with, and you should be able to go ahead and make those types of changes. So hopefully that's been helpful. Let me just make sure I catch up on the questions here. Michael says, slightly off topic, but a SKU question. When auto-assigning SKUs, will AIM add to your highest number, or will it use SKU numbers that have been vacated by removed items? Asking for a friend, asking for someone moving to AIM from a competitor point of sale. So technically, if you're auto-assigning SKUs, I'm assuming that you are referring to the in-store SKU button that the system has when generating new inventory records. So let's go ahead and take a quick look at that. If we go into add inventory, and we will notice there's this ISS button here to basically auto assign an item number should we not have one to begin with. This is referencing a system variable. That system variable in maintenance, general, and system variables is going to be for next in-store SKU, if I remember correctly, or next ISI number. There it is. So you can see how I hit that once, and now it says this is going to be 1001. Each time I hit that button, it increments this by 1. So basically, it will go in and just kind of use that next number in the list. If at some point and in the future, ISS 1000 gets removed from inventory, maybe it's been phased out, it's gotten discontinued and ultimately deleted, that number basically will not come back up in the rotation. It's just going to kind of keep going forward from there. So hopefully that answers your question, Michael. Thank you so much for it. Katie asks, this applies to customers and inventory. Does it make any difference if you rearrange the order? I actually recommend not rearranging the order if at all possible. I know that that has been a problem in versions of past. I don't know if that's still a problem. I haven't honestly tested that. What I recommend is I know that Excel has a function where if you want to basically like find certain things, there are functions in here where you can go in and basically hide records. So you could come in and you could hide certain details and things of that nature. And you'll just want to make sure then that you unhide them prior to importing those back in. Likewise, if you do resort by different details and such like that, you'll just want to make sure that you go back and you resort probably by this PK number. These are going to be in the order kind of that they got exported in. So I would recommend going back and resorting by PK if you rearrange or manipulate the order of the items in the table. Again, I don't know if that's actually an issue. I have not tested it myself. Above all, if all else fails, just make sure you've got that back up and you'll be fine. Christy asks, to clarify, the import-export permits changing data that already exists, but it cannot be used to add data. Yes, that is 100% accurate, Christy. And then Katie has one more question. You can't just make one category or subcategory tax exempt, can you? I don't believe so. Now, you can technically, if we come back into the inventory table, if we take a look at the category, so maintain inventory categories, you can technically come in and set a category to be taxable, either tax rate 1, 2, or both, or neither with the tax exempt option. That does not retroactively go in and change the inventory records. So you would need to go back in afterwards and make those manipulations. And let's just see if there is a table on here or a column on here for tax exempt. Let me see if I can get my own GoToWebinar table out of the way, my GoToWebinar toolbar. And that way I should be able to see all of these here. So let's just find this together. So Starting from the left and going to the right, we've got min-max, barcode, et cetera, et cetera. Vendor details. Let's get past the vendor details. Normal cost. Okay, so date received, vendor quantities, reminders, notes, seasons, codes, statuses, descriptions, quantities, QTY selections, active details, descriptions or discounts rather, loyalty exemptions, locators, minimums, web descriptions, MPNs, cost, tracking information, more active details, the date in service, mix and match labels, barcode labels, more active details, SKU links, single lines, composers. No, I am not seeing an option in here for, and maybe I did gloss over it, but I don't see the detail in there for whether an item has a taxable line on it. That being said, that's probably something that could be handy for an import export. And I can always recommend if that would be of a handy thing for you to give our support a call and go ahead and submit that as a program request. Obviously, that's how we get the feedback that we need to make the program better for you, so that you get the most out of it. If I remember correctly, way back in the day, and it's been a while that I've been here since the DOS years, but I don't believe that was even a thing where you could go in and change the taxable status of a given SKU. So that's probably a more recent change, and it's probably just something that hasn't been requested yet to have in the export import routine. So I would say if that is of a key factor there for you, Katie, because that, like I said, you can change the category to be taxable, and any new items you put into that would then honor that change to the tax code, but it wouldn't proactively change it. So something to keep in mind for that. If that is a thing for you, let us know, and we'll investigate that. So kind of a longer webinar, probably more to the tune of what I usually should be shooting for, just a lot of information in a short amount of time. But obviously this is a pretty big one. So that being said, as always, thank you so much for attending. Next week, we have 2 webinars coming up on QuickBooks and the vendor tips and tricks. So definitely check those out. If you are planning on making use of QuickBooks to coincide with your AIM-SI, your AIM system. I still say AIM-SI. Definitely let us know and hop in on that webinar. You may find that one really handy. And the vendor tips and tricks, one of our user suggestions. If you'd like to check that out, basically what we'll be investigating there are ways of finding out extra details with vendors that maybe you didn't know existed. Will be a lot of vendor history options, a lot of things to do with vendors that you may find handy. So definitely check that out if that's of an interest for you. I'll be releasing more webinars throughout announcing more webinars throughout the month of May. So if there are any more suggestions, definitely let me know. training@tritechretail.com. If I missed your question, and if I did, I do apologize. There were a lot of questions today, and I thank you so much for that. It's a lot more fun to have questions than it is just to talk to the camera. But definitely, if I missed your question, shoot me an email as well. I'll do my best to get back to you with any answers there. I will also send out a mass email when I find out more about whether or not those attributes are editable. I think they should be, but I will double check on that. And one final question here from Christy. Can we view old webinars that weren't registered for? Yes. On our webinar page, we have a link to the member portal. And in the member portal, there's a link at the very top of the screen where it'll say something to the tune of, check out all V12 webinars here. You'll click where it says here, and that'll take you to our webinar repository where these, as well as all of my past webinars, can be found and viewed at your leisure. Thank you so much for attending. It's been a real pleasure. And I will see you next week. Take care.